presentera Colin Campbell.
Väldigt kort. Jag heter Bert-Ola Bergstrand, företräder Social Kapitalforum. Jag ska inte prata så mycket nu, utan vi kommer att berätta lite mer om oss själva senare. Utan jag vill direkt invitera Colin Campbell, en kompis som har blivit... Jag känner sedan 3 år tillbaks och vi utvecklar lite projekt tillsammans. Jag kommer inte att översätta någonting, utan vill ni höra någonting mer om Colin, så kom till mig eller honom efteråt. Vi ligger ganska sent i tidsschemat redan nu. Så Colin Campbell, can you please welcome him?
Thank you. Absolutely no idea what you said, but I hope it was good. Nice to be here again. I think it's the 3rd time I've been, and in fact I recognise some faces that have been in some of the presentations before. Just to begin, I'll tell you right away that unlike Bruno, I don't have any money to give away. Apologies for that. What I'm going to try and do is talk about Scotland, the situation that we've had in Scotland in terms of developing the social enterprise sector out of what's sometimes called the social economy. We now refer to that as the third sector. So I'll talk a wee bit about what we see as social enterprise in Scotland. I'll talk about the route that we've taken and give some evidence about why. Talk about some of the infrastructure that we've built to support organisations who are interested in becoming more self-financing. Bruno talked about the need to invest in the organisation's human capital. We're also investing in the social capital of the sector to try and build that capacity. So what is a social enterprise? Generically, we would see it as an organisation that is delivering a service or a product where the public and private sectors often fail to reach. Private sector because there's not enough profit, public sector perhaps because they're too big. They bring people and communities together for economic and development and social gain. As I said, they're part of the third sector that is of particular importance in the UK, and in England you hear Cameron's government talking about big society, and by that they often mean the third sector. For us, social enterprise is really the combination of good business practice with community benefit. And in terms of gaining, becoming a social enterprise, a successful social enterprise, it's an organisation that is independent of grants. So over the last 20 years, there's been a reduction in the number of grants that are available and a move towards investment type instruments or funds. But that doesn't mean to say that grants are unimportant. They are independent of the state. We would see organisations that are set up by the state as arm's length as not being part of the third sector. Because they are business orientated, they are enterprising, that makes them more active and creative. They respond to the market rather than responding to the funders. A social enterprise that is successful tends to have control of their assets. Okay, but that doesn't mean to say they own the asset. It may be, for example, on a building, if you have a long-term lease, that becomes an asset that you can leverage to get investment in. So control of your assets is important. And in Scotland, this is particularly important. We are very, very clear that a social enterprise must have a lock on profit. So you want to generate a surplus, a profit, but that profit should not go to private individuals. It should go back into the organisation or to the client group. And finally, and I've highlighted in red, well connected. Sorry, yes, have you a question? No? No. The other thing I'd say is I'm Scottish, and so therefore my accent might be interesting to you. So if you do have any questions about what I said, please feel free to ask. The challenges that we encountered at the beginning of the process, 1999 really is when social enterprise began to be promoted in Scotland. There was a lack of understanding of social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. There was a serious lack of infrastructure. There was no startup investment or funding for social enterprises, no political champion, and social enterprises that were there were isolated and lacked a voice. So in 1999, pretty dire situation in Scotland if you were to look at it objectively. However, things have changed over the years. So in order to respond to that situation, the sector began by raising awareness. As a result of that, with knowledge of the sector, we began developing the support infrastructure. And through developing capacity, you're then in a position to respond to opportunity. There are always opportunities, but you need the capacity to do that. So I worked for an organisation for 8 years called SENSCOT, which is Social Entrepreneurs Network in Scotland. And it was not an intermediary agency, it was a collection of social entrepreneurs, people running social enterprises who came together to support each other and to use the assets within their own networks to support each other. We started off very, very small, one person really, and in order to cover the whole of Scotland, they had a weekly bulletin to connect people and encourage and tell stories. As I said before, we developed new support organisations. We, SENSCOT does not deliver any support services. We do not provide business plans. We do not provide access to funding because we believe that that would be in competition with other social entrepreneurs. We're about information. And we also began to pull together social enterprises in networks to connect them and to support each other. So over the years, 1999 SENSCOT set up. The organisation still is very small. We only have 8 employees. In 2002, it became clear that one of the difficulties for social entrepreneurs was accessing money for the individual. Normally what you have to do is set up an organisation, usually a charity. It takes a long time. You have a lot of people who perhaps they don't understand what the social entrepreneur wants to do. So we got involved in developing a fund across the UK, which was an investment of £100 million. And the interest from that was used to invest in small amounts of money to individuals.
At the point of get over here, a community non-benefit or non-distribution asset like given that your organization is an organization, whose goal is to support the immediate community, they are in need.
Yes.
Exactly.
To use business to deliver social or environmental benefit. In Scotland, I think everywhere in the world, social entrepreneurship is about combination of business to deliver social and environmental benefit. When you talk about social enterprise, as Bruno said, depending on which country you're in, the element of asset lock and the distribution of profit is different. But it's principally business to deliver environmental or social benefit. And the legal structure for that in Scotland, there are at least 8 different kinds of legal organisations that can be considered social enterprises.
So if I have to understand right, your organization's goal is to develop humanity.
Yeah. Better communities, well-being for the communities. And the infrastructure we developed was to do that. The next organisation was Development Trust Association in Scotland, which is about communities taking control. I began working for SENSCOT in 2003, and we started working on bringing people together in social enterprise networks. The human capacity element, we set up an organisation, a training organisation, which used social entrepreneurs to teach other social entrepreneurs. Rather than bringing in experts, we used the people that are already there, or sector-friendly consultants, so people who learnt from the sector and were there to support. So this is the Social Enterprise Academy, which is now a thriving social enterprise in itself, and one of its biggest customers is now the Scottish Government, because they want to know what successful social enterprise is as well. And then finally, First Port which was a wraparound service to Scotland Unlimited. Scotland Unlimited was just money, but you also need to point people in the direction of additional support. Once they have money, they need to know where they can get additional support. So it's a very tailored support service for sport. In 2008, after the development of the sector, we began to see the Scottish Government deciding that there was a need to invest in social enterprises, organisations that did not need grant funding from the government in order to deliver public benefit. And we have a range of services which is an investment pipeline. You need small, medium and large investments if you want to grow the sector sustainably over the long term. So the Social Entrepreneurs Fund, which was delivered by First Port, the Third Sector Enterprise, which is currently is a new contract and it has been won by a consortium of third sector agencies, and Social Investment Fund, which is the biggest fund, and it's from £500,000 up maybe to £1 million, £2 million investment in one organisation. And that is delivered by a charitable banking, it's an investment organisation called Social Investment Scotland. And obviously the difficulty of access to these funds depends on how much you're looking for. So the Social Entrepreneurs Fund is really quite a simple process. You go along, you tell them what your project is, and you fill in a 2-page application, and they then give you money from, say, £5,000 up to £20,000. The Enterprise Fund is investment grant funding. There's no loan in that, and that's from, it's currently £25,000 up to £250,000 in one organisation. You don't need to pay that money back, but you need to show that you are moving towards increasing trading income, increasing the amount of money that comes from business and not grants. The final fund, the larger fund, which is £500,000 on average, that is split. That is grant funding, so perhaps 50% grant funding and 50% loan funding that has to go back. An interesting fact perhaps about this amount of money, which in Scotland, a country of 5 million people, is an awful lot of money in comparison to other investments that we've seen. The capacity for the sector currently is at least 3 times this amount of money. So there is a big barrier. Investment is really required, as well as the wraparound, but there's a barrier. As the capacity grows, we need new opportunities, and so I'm interested to hear about the other investment opportunities, because I've certainly not heard anything about what you do in Scotland. So, yes?
Is it just national money, or is it European regional fund money in those money also?
Oh, it's a good question. I think that in the Social Investment Fund there is European money, because we had some problems with, what do you call it, when you get too much money and you have to give it back. I can't remember. What's that called? De minimis, yeah. Yeah. So there has been some issues, so I think but it's a small amount. The majority of the money comes from the UK allocation to Scotland, and then the Scottish Government make a decision about how they invest that money. So this is a little story about an individual, Frankie Hodge, who had a colourful background, let's say, not the typical bright student. Got himself into some difficulties sometimes, but he was at college and he was supposedly learning about IT. He was very bored by that, but he noticed his friends throwing cans in a bin, and he kept on saying, you need to recycle, and nobody did anything about it. So with his money, his benefits from the government, he went and he bought a bin for £5, and he put recycling. And he then, once he recycled the cans and bought another bin, and then another bin, and eventually he had 75 bins, all bought through recycling. At that point, he got funding from Scotland Unlimited, and he set up an organisation called Recycle Fife. He won awards. He went down and visited Tony Blair because of what he did, and he was an example of changing people's opportunities. He then went on to win an enterprise growth award, and they were able to pay somebody to help develop the business and have a financial expert. And recently, about 2 years ago, he won a much larger award of £1 million to buy his own building. So you can see his pride and joy behind him. And he now runs a business which employs over 30 people and has a turnover of more than £1 million. And depending on the contract mix, he is in profit as well. It's a very successful business and has taken advantage of the investment opportunities in Scotland. One of the things that Bruno said is that human capital is important, but he also mentioned partnership. One of the things that we saw, I certainly saw when I started in Sensco, is that social entrepreneurs were isolated. And when they were isolated, they didn't have a voice and they were not able to respond effectively to people who didn't understand them. In order to access opportunity, you need to be well connected. So there's an awful lot of words here, but basically this is a formula that we set up to deliver self-maintaining social enterprise networks, which are now cooperative organisations. So it's a bit like a farmers' cooperative. And when you bring a number of small organisations together, very quickly you have significant economic impact and employment opportunity, and they can support each other and they get a voice. And that changes the balance of power. And the way we did this is to look at shared norms, so an understanding, social enterprise, networks, and people working together, so social capital. You identify the social entrepreneurs, you develop them both geographically and thematically, and this is what Sensco got to the point of, that we were the central point in a network of 24 social enterprise networks, which have over 350 members, and the combined capacity is well over £250 million per annum, and thousands of employees and hundreds of thousands of volunteers. So significant capacity. This is where the breakdown is. We have geographic and thematic. So these are all social enterprise networks managing themselves, using Sensco as an opportunity to access information and opportunity. And basically what we have, therefore, is an ecosystem of well-connected social enterprises that when information is in the sector and opportunity, it can travel around very, very fast. And so this is what led me to be looking at social capital as a really important element, and looking for other partners around the world who were interested in this connectivity, not just human capital, but well-connected, the importance of connections, social connections of trust. And Manfred Hellriegel, who's going to talk to you after me, is also involved in the Social Capital World Forum. And the reason I mention it is we have a workshop this afternoon on the Social Capital World Forum, and Bertola, where is he, is hosting this year's Social Capital World Forum in November in Gothenburg. So if you're interested in getting involved, finding out more, we'll be happy to see you this afternoon. And that's me.
Thank you so much. And here's a little present from Gothenburg.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Då ska vi se. Vi har faktiskt kort paus nu. Det finns frukt, det finns dryck, det finns godis. Det finns utställningar ut med kanten där och där ute. Och ta gärna material hos de som har utställningar eller där ute också. Och sen så är det en liten tävling också innan vi samlas här klockan 10:29 eller 10:30, ungefär där. Tävlingen är att ni ska prata med minst en okänd människa. Varsågoda.